Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our hosts chat. It's Wednesday or Thursday. Oh my God, this is how my week's going. I won't tell you why, but there's been a lot of ups and downs with planning and time for me. It's Thursday night at 8:30 here in Toronto. I love our hosts chat. I'm so excited to be here tonight, and I'm so excited that you're all tuning in for this. Whether you're here on the live Zoom so that you can ask questions and have the camera and be a part of this living history, or whether you're watching on YouTube either in real time or later. We love it all, and we're just really happy you're here. My name's Sean Benson. I'm one of your hosts. Every week, I get the amazing pleasure of introducing Sensei Nicholas Suino, who, barring disaster, I'm actually going to get to see within the month. He is an 8th Dan in Iaido. He's a 6th Dan in Judo, a 6th Dan in Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm making this a little not about him, but he is now the instructor of the first master's rank Iaido practitioner in Legacy Shorin-ryu, which is my sensei Randy Dauphin. And I'm just so privileged to be a part of the whole lineage of all that. And so grateful to be under your umbrella that way, Sensei Suino. So just want to say hi, thanks. And, for me to get to watch my sensei grade and advance in things that you've taught him in it's just a beautiful honor to be a part of it all. And I want to say, thanks for teaching him. Thanks for teaching me. And how you doing tonight?
Doing great, thank you. It's always such a pleasure to get an introduction from you. I think I said this before, but my writing mentor in grad school always said, if you have one skill in life that you want to own, it should be learning how to introduce people. And I confess that you are far better at it than I am, but I'm really looking forward to seeing you at the end of the month for the Crucible. Maybe we can chat a little bit about that event today while folks are on here. Yeah, just really looking forward to renewing acquaintances in person after a year and a half now of not being able to see a lot of people around the world. Falls to me whenever we do these shows to introduce Sensei Randy Dauphin. Everybody on this call knows him. You know that he is very highly ranked in karate and now in Iaido. He is Yondan under my tradition. One of the things about the JMAC Iaido tradition is that you have to be a stalwart because ranks don't come quickly with us. They take a long time, especially if you do a remote study. But Randy hung in there and more than earned the opportunity and the right to have that Yondan certificate hanging on as well. Randy, man, we're going to talk a lot tonight and share a lot of information. It's great to see you. I'm really looking forward to you and a few of your folks coming down at the end of the month. How are you doing?
Yeah, I got my second vax. We talked about it. I got my second vax, which is going to put me inside the 14 days so that I can get to the United States. And then there's just a couple of things about when you have to test and provide that documentation, but getting it all in order. So I'm super stoked to come down there. And yeah, as far as my ranks in karate and Iaido go, I find them, I don't want to say easy to get, but when you just put your head down and keep training all the time, they just come, right? Like if you have no expectation on the date that the rank is going to come and you just let it happen in the right time, then it always does. And what I'm really looking forward to at the end of the month is I know for sure when we get down there, there'll be some punching, some kicking, some choking, and some chatting when we get down there. For sure. The Crucible is going to have a lot of those things. But I'm doing good. I feel good. And just good and happy. So, and I'm going to introduce Sensei Legacy tonight, and I'm going to introduce a little bit of a thought tonight, and we might want to talk about it or not, but Sensei Legacy is a 10th Dan. He was awarded that by his teacher, Anthony Sandoval. He's a member of the Canadian Black Belt Hall of Fame. He and Sensei Suino are both authors. There's a couple of the books that I keep handy with me all the time. In addition to Sensei Sandoval, a student of Harold Warden, Benny Allen, and Richard Kim, and also a student of Sensei Suino, he also received a black belt in Iaido from Sensei Suino. And I think Sensei Legacy and I are going to be training some Iaido tomorrow morning, actually, coming down here to swing some swords. Yeah, the thought that was in my head about Sensei Legacy tonight, my daughter and I did some katas tonight, and we're just talking about Sensei Legacy. He's her godfather. And I said, Sid, it's been much easier for me than it was for Sensu Legacy. It's been much easier for me to train, learn, do all these things. And I said, I really wish that Sensu Legacy had the benefit of the instructor that I had. And I'm not saying that Sensu Legacy didn't have great instructors, but I had better instructors than he had, right? Like I unabashedly can say that my teachers and the people who trained me were better. And one of the things I'll say about that, the easy road, is that, you'll hear people talk about Matsubayashi Shorinru, Kobayashi, Shobayashi Shorinru, Seitoryu. We do Legacy Shorinru. We do Legacy Shorinru, and Sensu Legacy put Legacy Shorinru together. He had to start with Chita Ryu katas and Goju-Ryu systems, and he kept toiling away in those systems and practicing his basics. And he had to go to New York City to find katas and to Japan to find katas. He had to go all over the world to put the system together that now I've benefited from for the last 33 years. I've been benefiting from that work for 33 years. And I'm so grateful that Sensei was so diligent and so single-minded about putting that system together. And so that's my introduction for Sensu Legacy tonight, is that we do Legacy Shorinru, and that system was put together by Sensu Legacy, and I'm really proud to be training that system. How you doing tonight, Sensu Legacy?
Good, thanks. Thanks for all that.
It's the truth.
Yeah, I love that. I was asking you about that the other day, Sensei.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind starting off with something that, because you just graded. I mean, you have a 7th Dan in karate, and you teach all of us. And then we got to see you be a student as you put on that hakama and strapped on your sword. And, maybe for some people out there, it'd be real useful. Like, how does that feel for you at this stage in your martial arts career, when you are preparing the way you prepared and you don't know what to expect? Because I know that you didn't know what to expect. So do you flip back into a student mindset? Is there a difference between a student and your regular day on a grading, or is it literally just business as usual? What is that for you?
I'm going to answer your question. Before I answer the question, I just want to say, because people who are logging in, they might have been expecting to see Sensei Panekia tonight, and he's had a family emergency, and that's why he's not with us. And our sympathy and our condolences and our thoughts and our prayer and our love are all going to him for what he's going through right now. So I want to put that out there before I answer that question. It's easy, Sean, I guess. When your sensei stands in front of you, you're a student, right? Like, I mean, that's just what it is, right? Like, if Sensei Legacy or Sensei Suino are standing in front of me and they say, Sensu Legacy says that block wasn't good, do it like this. You instantly switch and try and do it like that. Or that cut wasn't good, do it like this. And then when you're standing in front of a room of people and they're saying, can you show me something? Then you got to switch your mind to being a teacher. But I would say most of the time, if there's not people in front of me, I think I mostly have the mind of a student. I think, like, if I'm alone in the room and nobody's here, I think I have the mind of a student, because I'm curious about my art and I'm training it and trying to get better at it alone. And if my senses are in front of me, then it's much easier to just instantly transition into that mindset.
Right on. By the way, thanks for reminding me, Sensei. Just because we're jumping into the chat, I went in a little quick. For everybody watching, because we've turned this into a host chat, we want your questions, and that has the chat button at the bottom. So if you fire your question to Andre, who's running the show tonight, then if you want, we'll pop you on video and you'll become part of the chat. If you're new to this, that's how we do our hosts chats. Normally we just do the wording of the question and one of us will read it, but we want you to be on the screen to read your question. So if you pop in, you get to be a part of the show. You don't have to, by the way. And as always, you might hear some swearing or some stories that are off color tonight. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. And then I want to, yeah, Sensei? Sensei
Legacy wanted to say something, I think.
I was just going to elaborate on what you said there. The day you step into a dojo, you become a student. When I'm standing in front of my students, I'm also a student. I'm learning as I'm teaching them. If you have that mindset change at any time, you start to break down. That's my opinion. I've always been a student before anything. And so has Randy. Randy's a very good follower of the theory.
Is that conscious? Like, do you think about it? Like, do you go, like, or is it just it's fundamental to every way you approach the martial arts.
Well, I'm a biker too, and you just know it. You know what I mean? You know, when you ride a bike, you know you're a biker. And when you're a student, when you're in martial arts, you know you're a student. If you don't, you're lost. That's why everybody should have a sensei. I'm 75 and I have a sensei.
Do you think Sensu Legacy, I think, a thought I have about that when you're saying that, like something that pops into my mind is that I've always found you to be, and actually Sensu Suino as well, like the conversations that we have and the training that we do, the two of you are also very curious about martial arts, very curious about the, and not other martial arts, though you're very curious about the martial art that you've been doing for over 50 years. You're still very curious about it. And I don't think you've ever felt like I'm there now. So I guess the statement I would make is that if you never feel like you're actually there and you're still striving for something, you must still be a student. And the people that I see that aren't students, they seem to be out of shape. They stand in one spot in the dojo. They bark a lot of commands and they don't really move around too much anymore.
Their minds and bodies are fat.
Fat body. Hey, you know, it's so funny you use the word curious. In the past, I've taken a few courses with this guy named Pat Rogers. He's passed away, but he was sort of legendary in the tactical shooting community. And so I'd travel long distance to take classes with him. And so here's a guy who was in his 80s. He was a cop in Brooklyn. He was in Vietnam. You know, he was on all these SWAT teams. He knew more about firearms than, you know, any living person. And he was so curious. It was just funny that you said that word. It's a thing that came to mind. You know, if you had your AR set up a certain way, he'd come over and he'd go, why do you have that like that? And you'd say that, and he'd go, oh, that's fascinating. Here's a guy that does this, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and has been doing it for 50 years. And he just had constant questions, always learning. And when he learned something, he'd send it out to everybody and, all his followers. And he'd say, hey, like it's like a Nobel Prize winner in physics going, hey, I just found out that there's this thing about atoms that I didn't know before. And I think that's really a hallmark. If, at the very least, it's a hallmark of somebody you want to be around, right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say for me, like if because you're talking about my Yondan grading bends, in the last, say like 5 years, like it's like, okay, Sensu Suino would say to me, what are you working on? And I'm like, Taneuchi, my grip on the sword. And then like now, like 5 years later, he's like, what are you working on? I'm like, my Taneuchi, but really like just this finger, like this pinky finger, if it's in the right spot, then and I've experimented. I've been curious about if I move it over here or there, what happens as I'm cutting, always trying to find the secret sauce, right?
And again, I'm sure you don't want to make this too much about that grading, but can you just mention like how many cuts you did in preparation for that?
I definitely over prepared for it, and I'm happy that I did. I want to say it was somewhere around, I kicked my mind into high gear about a month before, and in the month before the grading, I did like 1,400 cuts or something like that with my Iaito, and then I got to say thank you to Justin Shea, Justin Shea got his Shodan too, and he's only the second person who's trained with me to get a black belt. So I'm really proud of that in Iaido, in karate, others. But he helped me a lot with learning a two-person set that I ended up not even having to do for Sensu Suino. But I'm super happy to go to the dojo one day, and it was time well spent because it wasn't wasted, because now we have a deeper understanding of that. So yeah, and I was super proud on the day. Obviously we have COVID going on, and so it was a virtual grading. Allegedly, I had my 5 seniors in karate, so being my teachers, Sensei Legacy, Sensei Baron, Sensei Kettleberger, Sensei Chalky, and Sensei Bear. They're the last ones left from when I joined that are still here, and I'm really proud that they witnessed my grading. And my 3 senior students being you and Robert Chlumsky and Ron Watson. And our newest white belt got to witness it as well, which was Christine Hussey, who she's got some extra privileges in the dojo.
Yeah, I just love that my teachers, like, each belt they're better than their previous belt physically as well. Like, I think that fat mind, fat body is so prevalent, and I'm just real happy. Like, I know those numbers. We talked about it, but I just want to hear it out loud. And like, if I have a teacher who's not actually practicing the thing they're grading in to that extent, then what's motivating me?
What do we think makes the fat mind, fat body happen?
Whew.
Ego and fear. Yeah. Fear of not being able to perform the way they should because they didn't train hard enough. I hope I'm not insulting anybody, but that's the way I see it. I mean, if you're training, martial arts is for life. If you've trained 30 years, you should be in damn good shape, and your mind should be sharp. You should know your art. That's why you become a teacher. Ego and laziness get in the way.
Do you think, Sensu Legacy, that some people think they got there? Like, you know, they've set something in their mind as the goal, which is exterior to the actual being on the path and doing it, which I got a black belt, so I'm there, and now I stop.
Well, I had, when I introduced White Crane when we first initiated White Crane into our school, I had black belts quit because they said, I don't want to do Kung Fu. That was their statement. Really, it was because they were fourth dans and they had learned all the katas for the system. And now they weren't going to be the top guy anymore. So they quit, had their own little school on the side where they were the highest ranking dan. And 1 to 2 years later, they weren't around. They weren't the leaders they thought they were. It takes more to be a leader, more humility, more training, etc.
That's just platinum advice about leadership. Everybody thinks leadership is that you got to take charge, right? I mean, to some extent, there's an ego involvement. You have to have enough ego to think you can do it. But the longer I do this stuff, the more I realize it's humility, right? The more I realize it's about helping other people and continuing the path of learning. That's so powerful.
You're actually proud. You know, pride and ego can go either way. You're talking about pride. You're proud of your path.
Well, there was someone who diverged from our club, who I won't name, but who said to me when I ran into him later, well, I left because, Sean, you're never going to get the scrolls.
That guy's such an idiot.
Right. And at that point, I maybe a Shodan or a Nidan, I can't remember. And I remember telling Sensei Dauphin that and being like, I'm not the Menkyo Kaden, but I have access to the scrolls anytime I want to call either of you and open the books on whatever my question is. And Sensei said, that's right. Like, I just was like, how do you not think you have the scrolls?
I don't know. That's just a stupid statement. He's an idiot.
Yeah.
It's funny how when things in life happen, when things in life happen, in retrospect, you're happy you did certain things. So that person was a close friend to me at one time. And I remember, I think I was the first Q, and he had just gotten his Shodan, and I was getting ready to go for my Shodan. So he was going to help me out by fighting with me. And I remember I roundhouse kicked him in the head and knocked him unconscious. And Sensu Legacy was over tying his shoes up. We were in Aldhouse College at the University of Western Ontario. And he woke up when he hit the ground. He jumped back up. And Sensu said, that's enough, you two. You're not fighting anymore. So we were done fighting for the night. But then when Sean told me that story about meeting him after he'd quit the club, my mind went back to that. And I thought, I'm so glad I knocked that guy out. I'm so happy that I roundhouse kicked him in the head. And I hope he listens to this tape today or sees it on YouTube, because he's going to know I'm talking about him. And I hope he comes here to talk to me about it, because I'd love to see him and talk to him about it.
Yeah. He could show you the scrolls that he
Yeah,
apparently
maybe
went to
get
get.
some scrolls from.
Yeah.
That's completely wrong thinking. it'd be nice to get there. It's probably your turn at some time, like mine came. But I would rather have my teacher than to be that person, because I'd be learning more and more and more and more. Once my sensu dies, or then I don't have that advantage. You know, it stops at me, and then I have to go. It's not that easy being a tenta. You know, it's somebody points to you, say he's a tenta, and well, there's a certain amount of very little ego, and I never use that for anything. Your sensei is a prize. It's your prize.
I would contend there's some people for whom it is easier than you, Hanshi, because they don't look at it that way. I don't know though. I can't know. But I think there's some people for whom 10th Dan becomes the billboard
I
more
think
than a responsibility.
Sensu
would assume.
said this. Sensu Suino said a genius is a person who never makes the same mistake once. I don't think he said it. One of his teachers said it. Right? So
Yeah.
we're geniuses because we have a teacher. So we don't have to make the same mistakes that they made because they point them out to us before we start to make them.
Yep.
That's why you need a teacher to keep you on that path. Because, you know, it only takes like 1 degree and then 10 miles down the road, you're way off. You need to stay on the path. You need a teacher. You need to be a classical martial artist to get all the information.
That
Yeah,
actually,
and
yep.
It helps keep perspective too, right? I mean, most of us who have had great teachers are forever humiliated by what a horrible job we've done trying to emulate them, right? It's like oh, I wish I was a tenth of the martial artist my teacher was, and I mean, alive or dead, they still represent that. But it's such a powerful reminder, right? Like Hanshi, you say, you know, when you step on the mat, what you know is under your feet. Compared to your instructor, it's always, you know, the people that we've trained with as teachers have this vast level of accomplishment and knowledge, and it's so humbling to recognize that and to aspire to someday, you know, being able to kind of stand in their shadow.
Yeah, literally and figuratively, Sensu Legacy has huge feet.
However, it may be that's all you will ever know, but you may not know all under your feet, you know, and neither does your sensei, likely. That's why he's still training. So just under your feet as opposed to the entire dojo floor is a massive challenge.
We've got these great role models. You know, Yamaguchi Sensei was like that too. He was incessantly curious. You know, his wife called him an Iaido fanatic. You know, he would have a student come over at 9 a.m. and they'd do a 2.5, 3 hour lesson. Then he'd have some lunch, and then I'd come over and we'd do a 2.5, 3 hour lesson. And then if he didn't have another student that night or wasn't going to teach kendo, he'd put his gear on and he would train, you know, and he's fanatic about it. And I'm like, Sensei, what are you doing? He said, I'm working on my Iaido. You know, this guy's 82 years old. He's been doing stuff for decades, right? And ends up being a 10th Dan and Meijin with Ima. Everybody I know that's incredible at this stuff is completely devoted to it and
He's
always humble about it, right? Yeah.
Meijin master, right? Can you explain to everyone what a Meijin is?
It's a little tough, like a lot of Japanese concepts. Meijin means a person with a name, right? It's not the same as national treasure because it's not granted by a government, like a national government. What is granted by a body of experts, in this case Kokusai Budoin, with in order to truly do that legitimately in Japan, you have to have a sanction from, in this case, the imperial family, right? So IMUF is a martial arts organization that was founded by members of the imperial family and still has always has a liaison or a representative. So Meijin carries this connotation. You have this name, and it's a name, you know, you got to understand how connected Japanese culture is with the notion of connectedness to the cosmos. Boy, this is tough to answer. They're just saying you have essentially reached perfection, and we're going to give you our, you know, stamp of approval.
A living saint. I got very off to the side story about Sensei Yamaguchi. When he was here and we were together and we were having a few drinks, he was sitting beside me, and he is a small person. When he reached over to get his glass, his pant leg came up, and almost like a mutant ninja. His leg at the top, huge like this, and then it narrowed down, and he had these little sock, things holding up his socks. And it was completely out of proportion. His legs were so huge and so hard and muscular looking. It was incredible. And how old was he at that time? 70 something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, an amazing man, right? Just transformed by his training, like we all are, right? I think you've made this point too, right? That he sort of had no elbow, right? Because his forearm muscles were so developed.
Yeah.
If I can, sorry, Hanchi.
Definitely a Mijin.
Yeah, just you talking Sensei Suino about him training at that age, and then also, Hanchi, you just mentioned like just stay on the path, and I figured that's a pretty good segue to Robert's question, because he's kind of asking about something along those lines. So,
are we really gonna let him have his camera on?
Let's just.
We'll just put on like a filter.
Yeah.
Hey,
Robert.
Hey, Robbie.
all right.
So here's my question. Is there a lesson that you've learned in your many years of training that cannot be learned in another way, as in something that you can't learn in just a few years of training?
I don't think I can answer that because I don't know everything. I don't know if there are other ways, if you're asking me that. There are certain things that, to me, I could have never learned in any other way because of the type of person that I was and am. So maybe somebody can help me on that one, or somebody else has.
Well, I'll start if you don't mind, and then use it. The one thing I think that martial arts teaches you quicker than anything else is consequence. I think if you're in a real dojo where you're really training and you have a real sensei, you learn consequence for mistakes fast, because they tell you when the person moves in, you block your head, you do this, you do that. And if you don't, there's going to be an instantaneous consequence that's going to impact you in a different way than when you slice the golf ball and it ends up in the water, or, I don't know the other activity. I know there's other activities that have consequences, but you usually inflict those consequences upon yourself. Like if you're mountain biking, you chose to go down this path. When you're in karate, you're standing in front of somebody and they're inflicting the consequence on you of your mistake. And I think that's one of the things about martial arts that you don't get in other activities, and you learn it fast.
That's very good. Where else can you, I hate to use this word, but where else can you kill somebody other than in karate? By that I mean, when you're doing kata, if your body, mind, and spirit is involved, you have to visualize yourself when you're striking to do the ultimate art. And that's what fighting is. In the old days, if you got into a fight, they buried one and the other guy walked away. But that is something that helps you overcome being afraid in a fight, or understanding how dangerous a fight really is by preparing your mind through kata. That's why, some fighters put kata aside as not very useful. They're clearly wrong, because you build your strength, your mind, your everything from the inside, and your mind is the driver. So you're right there, Randy. I agree with you.
Yeah, isn't it? I don't know if it's possible to train fear out of yourself in any other way. I just don't know, because I mean, it's one thing to do a dangerous activity over and over again, you know, move steel girders or something. But in the martial arts, right, if you stay in it, in karate long enough, I mean, that stuff is terrifying to the non-trained person if they're rational. But you do it long enough and grow to understand it, and the whole complex of pain and reaction and fear and adrenaline, and you learn to live in that space. And then that's a transferable skill too, right? You can apply that in other places in life. I don't know if that can be done to the same extent outside of martial arts.
I remember Sensu being in the dojo with you. You might not remember this. I think the guy's name was Scott. And you and I and I think Miller was there, and he was comparing his Iaido stroke to his golf stroke. And I made like a weird face. Like I remember I was like, and you looked at me and you're like, Sensei Dauphin, do you have something to say about that? And I was like, I just can't see how you can compare a golf stroke to an Iaido stroke. To me, that's flawed thinking. And Miller like nodded his head. He was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm on the right track here. Like if Samurai Jack is nodding his head, it must be good. And then he started to like defend his position. And again, I made another face and you said, oh, Sensei Dauphin, do you have something more to add to this? And I said, well, in golf, if you got a bad swing, the consequence is it goes in the water or you don't get it. In Iaido, if you have a bad swing, your head gets chopped off or you're missing an arm. Like, and if you're not approaching it that way, then you're not approaching it correctly.
I don't think you can totally lose fear. That's what brave men are. They're scared and they go ahead. So I think what it is from martial arts, from the white crane and from black belt in karate, you become calm. And then you can see things in a realistic view. But when you panic and you're scared, you start to shake, you don't see properly. So fear is always going to be there. You just have to override it. I mean, if fear is a safety valve, you know, you're not going to, if I'm standing on a cliff and there's a little brook down below, fear keeps me from jumping off, right? So sometimes it's a safety valve. And then when it comes to attack you and you can be calm enough, you can defend yourself or you can do the proper thing as opposed to panicking.
So I'd love to expand on part of what I think Robert's asking. You know, there's 2 non-serious martial artists on this call and there's 3 serious martial artists. And I'm not even being glib with that. Like somebody can come in and by age 21 have a killer punch, a killer roundhouse kick. They can calm their fear. We see young champions emerge. Now we know their peak doesn't come till maybe 10 years later, but generally that's still not a serious martial artist yet by our definition. So I'd love to know, like, what is it that you've learned at 35, at 40 years that you can't get at 7 years, even if you're gifted?
You can't get the experience, period. Like you just don't have experience. You have 7 years experience, not 30 years experience.
Right.
Like, I mean, I don't want to oversimplify it. That's my opinion.
There's more. There's more. You need a lot of snowflakes to make a snowball. There's more all the time.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on that. You know, I'm trying to push a lot of culture into my senior group, my second cadre. You know, we've got some established people who've been there a long time. I call them Cadre 1, and then Cadre 2. I'm spending a lot of time talking to them about the culture in the dojo, what the expectations are, and they're soaking it up. They love it. But, you know, a lot of them, you know, in their 20s, early 30s, they're great martial artists, but they behave like people in their 20s and 30s. They have impulsive judgments, and you know, if you're impulsive, right? I mean, I'm not being critical. I mean, I grew that same way, but there's a gravity to a seasoned martial artist, a serious one whose mind is not fat, right? And you don't get that by acting impulsively. You have time to develop patience, calmness against fear, the ability to see consequences not just in the second, but also over the years and over the decades. it's a really different outlook. And, you know, I love where I am now, and I can't wait to see what my perspective is in 20 years. It's really fun process.
Sydney just texted me, and it came across the screen as Sydney's my daughter, Sensu Legacy's goddaughter, and she's still a quitter. She's still in the quitter books. She's 23, and she's only been training for 15 years now. So she's halfway.
Come on, Sydney.
She's halfway to being not a quitter. She
Sydney.
texted me one word, and she said grit. Right? Those young people don't have the grit yet. They haven't developed that grit. And I think, you know, I said it before on a previous one. I think fighting, martial arts, life in general makes you hard. Like it eventually makes you hard, and then you choose to be hard or not hard. Younger athletic champions, and I'm not taking anything away from them, they don't have that grit and that hardness yet because they stay in the realm of the 10 things. And then after a couple of years, now you've got 20 things, and you start to realize the magnitude of how much is actually under your feet.
I would have to, I was going to mention to Sensei Suino that calmness is very big. Richard Kim, my once sensei, always used to say, Legacy, you need to stand in the eye of the tornado. While everything else is going crazy around you, you need to be calm in order to control it, or you're just part of the tornado. You know what I mean? Where they have found birds, he said, flying around inside the eye of the tornado. So I don't know how they found them, but that's what he said. So I think calmness, because as you get older, you don't have that physicality, and you need to be calm because you need to make the right move at every time. Say you're in a confrontation. And that's what White Crane is. White Crane relies completely on your black belt training in order to be calm and say, step to the inside and poke a guy in the eyeball. You think that's easy? A guy's trying to knock you out, so you just step up and stick your finger in his eye? Why don't you just do that then? Right? Let's stick my finger in your eye. You're gonna lose it, right? But it's getting in there, being calm and being sure of yourself through years and years and years of training to be a real martial arts master, not just somebody who can fight, get somebody a fat lip who just hasn't trained. There's much, much more. And I think you hit it right on the head, Sensei Suino.
You know, it's interesting. You can, I mean, just like physical skills, that calmness can come faster or slower for people, right? And if it comes slower, they're going to struggle a lot more in their fighting and in their learning, right? As maturing as human beings. And what's interesting is there's a connection between your willingness to participate without worrying about winning, and how quickly you can become calm. You know, if you just go in, you empty your cup, you put yourself in a student mindset, to kind of tie this back to where we started, right? And just go, I'm here, I'm going to learn. Let me do this thing, whether it's sparring in karate or randori in judo, and I'm, you know, do it without ego. You're automatically calmer. But if you bring your, you know, impulsive nature, your desire to win instantly without putting in the hard work, that calmness takes a lot longer to come.
As you know, we've trained together in White Crane, that I've never really wound up to touch you with White Crane, but I just had to touch you in the right place, and it worked, right? So you don't need all that power. You just need that calmness to make sure that when you step to the inside, and I use this as an example, it is like hitting a nerve center is like poking someone in the eye. You just have to know, or grabbing somebody's brown spot, nipple, in case you don't know what a brown spot is, and twisting it, you know. So it takes a lot of calmness. That's a big word.
What do you think, Robert?
I mean, this is giving me a lot to think about, but the thought I had when I asked that question was something I've seen over 20-ish years, and I imagine it echoes past the quitter bar, but just the value of consistency in your training, and just, you know, something that was said on the show, which was it's not about who's best, it's about who's left. And I imagine over 30, 40, 50 years, it's that the people who have consistently trained and kept at it and kept digging, as opposed to working hard for 5 or 10 years and then plateauing and not working through those longer term struggles that are the ones that are around that are still training, still the best people to go to, etc. So I think it's just that value in consistent training over many years that really gets you to where you need to be.
It hasn't all been discovered yet. Not everybody, no one knows everything. There are some things likely not discovered that one of us will run across. That's what's going on. It's like hunting for gold. I'm trying to make the art better, trying to have students, like some of my students, all of my students, and me trying to make them better than myself so that the art gets better. And I know some senseis don't want their students to be better than them because they lose face because they're there for the wrong idea, or for the wrong thing.
Great question, Robbie.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me make my appearance.
Yeah, it'll never be the same now.
I still think
Now you keep handsome Robbie in the background. They all have an image of what you are.
it's too pretty. Get them out of here.
Yeah.
Tune in. Yeah, when our audience lags, we'll bring him back in for a second.
Yeah.
Technical difficulties.
Well, we have
Right.
another question from an arguably prettier one, which is Sydney, if she wants to pop on and ask us what she's asking.
Turn her camera on.
Hey,
Hi.
Sid.
Hey, Sydney.
Nice to see you.
It's nice to see you. Yeah, my question, I just wanted to say, like, from the Elite Fighter, the section about nature and martial arts, obviously the pine forest and all the animals, but I think we get caught up in the imagery of the nature and not the lesson from the nature. And so the lesson in your book was so, I don't know, amazing for me. But you talk about the task of traditional martial arts leading others back to nature and ultimately having respect. And so but then at the end you say, education is the key and traditional martial arts can teach us what is valuable. If good habits are acquired early, they will last a lifetime. And just in the context of nature, and that was the theme of the section, what does it show us? Like, where does the martial arts and the nature overlap to show us what is valuable, in your opinion? Or what are those good habits, or where do we find them considering the nature?
Well, we all are made of nature matter from the Big Bang on, right? So I think the Western world has taken wrong steps and they butt heads with nature. They destroy it. And in the Orient, I believe that they sort of pin themselves with it a little bit more and it's seeped into their martial art. So where we're all equal is inside. So when we go inside, like Gitchin Funakoshi said, body, mind, and spirit, you can't live without all of them working together. So you must train them together. So if you want to discover about yourself and the relationship with nature, you do kata. You go in the inside. That's where we're all equal. And everybody can discover that there instead of going out and, getting some people who've made up these wild and crazy ideas and they go off and create cults, and some of them may be okay, but through martial arts, by doing kata and meditation, you can return to nature because you are nature. You're part of it. So, and it is our duty as martial arts teachers to make it available to those who want it. You don't want to shove it down their throat, but you want to make sure that it's available. And again, where are you going to get that? You're going to get it from your teacher. I can't express that enough. Like I know guys who started call themselves like Terrible Sam, or they make up these things, and And you just laugh at them. Like even some of, I ran into one guy where he made all his students wear all their belts, like from white belt right up to black belt.
At the same time.
Yeah, at the same time. I saw it. I couldn't believe it.
I was in the room too.
You have people who are too much into themselves as opposed to, I guess you should be into yourself, but I mean, they're too much into their wild ideas. The martial art is already there. In order for anything to be an art, it has to be proven to work 90% of the time. Okay? It works 90% of the time, then it's called an art. If you go out there and you only defend yourself, I'm only using this for an example, you defend yourself and use half of your fights, well, you didn't train very well. Okay, so nature has a lot to offer, right? And nature is really strong. Right? What's stronger than the wind or water? What's calmer than the wind or water? So there's a lot to be learned there from nature because we are part of it. We just have to connect. You'll be better for it. Anybody want to add to that? I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, the thought that comes to my mind, Sensei, is in nature, it doesn't matter if it's a field mouse or a grizzly bear. They all have like a self-preservation mechanism like we do as well. And our training, I think initially, at least for me, I mean, it leads always to other things, right? It expands your mind. And at the brass tacks, when I came to karate, it's because I wanted to be a better fighter and I wanted to be able to defend myself if I was pressed in that way by somebody that wanted to hurt me or take something from me. And that's why I wanted to train. And then of course it expanded from there, just, you know, but I think of that where it's the same, like that's one of the things that all life tries to preserve itself. Martial arts teaches you to preserve itself. Another interesting thing, Sydney, when you were talking, is I was just thinking about how much all of the people on this call enjoy being outside. All of us.
Yeah.
Sensu Legacy says all the time, you have to train outside. I've trained underneath the tree, the maple tree in Pinafore Park for over 30 years, like all the time under that tree. That tree has grown with the sweat and blood and tears of martial artists seeping into the ground and it pulling it into its root system of that tree. That tree's seen more martial artists than some humans.
Not a quitter.
No, not a. And Sydney, where's your favorite place that you learned karate and learned the community of karate? And it was at karate camp, outside, in tents. That's where you learned all that stuff, outside.
You know, if you're part of nature, so if you fight nature, it's like swimming against the stream, you know. But if you hook yourself up with nature, if you become part of nature, then it's more like swimming downstream. You have all that help. Everything is behind you. The other way, you're facing everything. It's much easier to walk with the wind than it is to walk against it, right? Or the current, whatever. So I'm just trying to use that as an example for people that are watching that may not be martial artists. I'm trying to give them ideas of how to think. So if my examples are a bit meek, I apologize.
The last thing you said, reminded me of something I say at tests. You know, when we give kids a new belt, they're sitting in seiza facing us, and they have to take off their old belt and they have to fold it, right? And they have to fold it into eighths, so it's this nice, neat package. And I always show them, if they haven't paid attention yet, the belts have a memory, right? When you buy a belt from the store, it's wrapped up, and unless you've had that belt for 5 years, it has a memory. It remembers where it was bent. And the kids, at first, they always try to bend it the wrong way, and they set it in front of them, and it just pops all over the place. And I always give this lecture at tests. I say, hey, kids, listen, your belt has a memory. And if you fold it according to the memory, it's going to be a lot easier. And so the lesson for the test is, you know, when you're trying to get something done in life, or you're trying to get somebody to do something, it's a whole lot easier to work in accordance with the way it wants to go. And that ties in with what you said about nature, right? It's much easier to punch hard if you use physics principles, geometry and physics. It's much easier to cut well with a sword if you use geometry and physics instead of trying to go against it. And you know, the point of my speech in my promotional ceremonies is it's much easier to work with people if you go in accordance with their desires or their tendencies instead of trying to fight them.
Yeah. And Sid, for me, you know, part of the quote you read, which is education is the key and traditional martial arts can teach us what is valuable. And for me, when I think about what's valuable, you know, most valuable is, and it's been touched on, and Hanshi talked about it with the idea of being part of nature's connectivity, to be connected. You know, all religions are based on the idea of this yearning for part of the bigger. And even when we talk about this history and lineage, to be part of the bigger, and the idea that we get this connectivity through nature. You know, Hanshi used a perfect example in the way we talk about it in sobriety. Is like, I'm a drop of God in an ocean of God. I'm not separate from. And it's only when I separate myself from that I lose the very thing that I'm fundamentally doing this for, which is to be at one in this moment with all that is. And sometimes it's being kicked by the other thing across me, and sometimes it's kicking. And then, you know, it's funny because I'm going out to BC, but like, I remember the first time I threw a punch on that coast with Nick McLaren, Sensei McLaren, and God, that felt weak and small compared to the waves and the wind. It was like, oh, in a small dojo, the floor shakes when I throw this punch. Out here, nature does not give a shit. And it's a beautifully humbling thing because I'm just an animal, like the bird, like the other person. And I like not forgetting that. So that for me is, it reminds me of that value of connectivity.
Sensei Legacy punched a tree once. And if the tree could have laughed, I think it did. I don't think it didn't even have a mark on it anywhere, right, Sensei?
Not a mark. Not a mark. Totally ruined my right hand. Well, yeah.
When you were talking about fear, it because when you said in the West we go against nature, I think there's so much fear of nature just in Western peoples, you know, from bugs in our home to going out and being in nature for even a day, people get afraid. And just the idea of turning fear into respect was something I was thinking of. And if are you going to be afraid of something, or are you going to respect it? And like Uncle Sean just said about, you feel weak because you respect the waves, or that's where my mind.
Yeah, I respect grizzly bears as long as like I'm far away from them. The closer they get, the less respect I have and the more fear comes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a little bit like, you know, when I was the most nature I've been in since being an adult, like not summer camp, was doing a 3.5 week trek through Bhutan, which is the Himalayas. And when you're up in those mountains, it's the first time I sort of began to understand death, because the difference between the tree that was alive and leaned over and had just fallen, and the moss and the ants and everything were on it, was so minute. And the circle of it, it's such a typical phrase, but was so clear. It was like, oh, there's no beginning or end to death and life here, because the thing that's falling is the next thing's life. And it just was, you know, you're up at 14,000 feet, your ears are humming, or it's a magical place, who knows which. And then you look at that and you're like, wow, this just has no beginning or end as far as we can conceive of. And even this, however many years we get, like, it is what it is. And I really clocked "it is what it is" as a real phrase up there. I was like, that tree is what it is. The ants are what they are. I'm walking in it too. There's no beginning or end to it.
And Uncle Sean's going to come out to see you, and then you can take him on some of those hikes.
That's going to be great. It's going to be great.
And then Uncle Gary and I are coming out at the end of the month.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm so excited to host or see you guys. Before be proud of my, I have got Ollie up on my wall here. I just wanted to show you that.
That's a very famous picture of the champ. So,
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Great man. Great man.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Love you,
Lee.
Sid.
Thanks for the question.
Thanks,
Miss you,
Sid.
Sid. Love
Love
you.
you. Yeah.
Yes,
As we're in a transition moment, I just want to shout out to Daniel J. Holland III on this call. I'd love to have a question from you. So when you feel ready, submit it, and then I want to get you in this conversation.
Yeah, I want to see that guy too.
Yeah.
Well, while we're doing that, I'd like to wave to a special friend of mine. I already did. Sydney looked really nice, eh? She looked really pretty and grown up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's so mature. Like I was talking to her today, she provides me with things. It's like you said, Sensei, when you stand in front of your students and you can learn from them. Like tonight when I was talking to her, I just learned so much. Like my mind through the conversation just shifted in totally different directions than it was before I had talked to her.
You're always a student.
Yeah.
Always. Even if you stand in front of your children, you're still a student. You learn things from them.
You know what I shared our texting, Sensei, with Sydney tonight when I was training with her. And she got like a little emotional and she said, you know, Uncle Gary's really like my only grandfather that I've ever had.
Wow.
That's what she said. He's
Don't
been
get
the
me
one
going.
who's been there with me from the time I was born all the way till now.
Okay, don't get me going. Let's just go somewhere else.
Hey, I got one I want to throw out, if it's a good time before we go to Andrew and Dan. So everybody who comes on, like 99.9% say Bruce Lee is the most influential martial artist of all time. And the reason I think is pretty obvious. Now, I wasn't around for that period of the pre-Bruce Lee, post-Bruce Lee. But I want to ask a question, and this is actually independent of any BJJ I do, but is it arguable that Rorion Gracie, who founded the UFC and made sure Royce was going to win it, is equally influential or more so, partly because of what the UFC became, but partly because of what it made every martial artist have to become within 4 or 5 years, which is a more rounded version of whatever art they did?
I would say no. I would say they're not even close to the same.
No.
Because I would say that if you asked an old woman in Africa who Rorion Gracie is, she would say, I have no idea who that is. And if you said, who's this picture? She'd go, that's Bruce Lee.
Yeah. It's just the influence we're talking about. Like, because I mean, you got to respect a guy like Gracie as well. But again, I guess he would be a little bit like myself, and I apologize for putting myself in his light. But there was martial arts before me, and there was jiu-jitsu before him. We're just we just renovate a little bit,
Right.
and
Right.
different things. Put in the modern, more modern stuff, because things change with time.
Mm-hmm.
The great Gracie did that.
I think the difference would be for me is that he influenced other martial artists for sure. Like there's no doubt about that. But I don't think he drew in the number of martial artists into all martial arts that Bruce Lee drew in.
Well, that's actually what made me think of the question. Was I was wondering, with the BJJ explosion, if you took like what percentage of the population before and after Bruce Lee, and what population pre-1993 till now. That's what made me think of it.
I will say this, that he put some wheels on jiu-jitsu. Like it wasn't like it is now. So he.
Yeah, it was like a garage art before.
A lot for it, but jiu-jitsu was there before this gentleman, I believe, right? He didn't.
Oh, yeah. I mean, going back
Right.
to Japan and obviously before, but I was more thinking of the UFC and what it made. Like, for example, Sensei Dauphin, and I talked about like Sensei Dauphin knows how to defend a double leg takedown. I think in many ways because of the UFC type MMA vibe. I might be wrong, but that comes about as a result of that influence of that fundamentally organization and therefore the explosion of MMA. I'm thinking less about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and more about what it did for MMA.
Well, I'm going to tell you that it's because of him that I learned to fear jiu-jitsu, because of what everybody did in the ring, MMA and those. Before that, I had no idea. And then when I saw strikers getting taken to the ground and I could see their arms, the bones bending or choking out, I started to fear it. And again, that fear, there's that safety valve. So I wouldn't put myself up in front of a guy like that and he'd break my back or something, right? So,
Sensei Sweeney, you straddled those eras, pre and post Bruce Lee.
Yeah, my immediate reaction to your question was, I feel like Bruce Lee had an influence in the martial arts, yes, but in the broad culture, and it turns out not just the Western culture, like
Right.
worldwide. He was a movie star. He's kind of like Elvis Presley. Everybody's heard of him, and most of people have heard of him, have heard of Jeet Kune Do, they've heard of Be Water, right? They've heard of some of his philosophical stuff, and so it doesn't diminish Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at all. I think it's been a massive change. BJJ and the UFC have been a massive change in the state of martial arts in the last 20 years or whatever. But Bruce Lee changed the culture, just like Elvis did.
Right.
And BJJ alone is an amazing thing. It's an absolute jewel, and it's an amazing martial art. But I don't think it occupies a sphere that size, if you know what I mean.
That makes sense, because I was born into the world you're describing, so I didn't witness that change. And there's that scene in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Quentin Tarantino movie, where Bruce Lee fights the stuntman and doesn't necessarily win. And when you see that posted online, I realized that Bruce Lee's a religion. Like Bruce Lee's, like the comments are like somebody's insulting Jesus Christ, and people will only accept that he could walk on water. And that's, again, it's part of what made me think of the question. Is like, wow, he really affects people on that deep level you're describing.
Yeah, I think he's always going to appear in anybody's top three. Like his name will always be there no matter what. Just like if you say about the most influential musician, Elvis is going to always show up on that list near the very top.
Yep.
Same with athletes and boxers. Muhammad Ali is always going to be up at the top. Like those people transcend their sport or their art or their music. They've transcended it to a different level. Like what you're talking about, it's cultish. It's like religious, right? Like look when Ali died, how many days they had to have his funeral and how long the lines were of people who wanted to just get in there and say their goodbye, right? It's different.
Yeah, I hear that.
Are these guys coming on, or are we going to talk about other stuff?
We got a question from Andrew Percival and a comment from Dan.
Well, turn Dan's camera on first.
All right.
Hi, Dan.
Dan!
Hey,
He's muted.
unmute him, please. Unmute that gentleman. We think we got you now.
Is that better?
Yes.
That is perfect.
All right.
Nice to see you, Dano.
Great to see you too.
Yeah. This is my roommate from Japan.
That's right. Right. When are we going back?
I remember, Dan, one night you paid me such a good compliment, and I don't even know if you remember, but my son Benjamin was struggling a little bit, and I was on the phone with him, and I was talking to him for a long time, and then you were there while we were having that conversation, and when I hung the phone up, you just rolled over and looked at me, and you said, Randy, you're a great dad. Like, yeah, that was just such a nice compliment to get from a good friend, to hear that and somebody to say something like that. So I want to share that with everybody, that was a really nice compliment that you paid me. It made me feel really good.
Well, I meant it. I mean, I couldn't hear the whole conversation, just half of it, but yeah, it was great advice.
So how you doing tonight?
I am doing very well.
What martial arts did you do today? How many of your 100 martial arts that you trained did you do tonight?
Today I ran kids karate with Jeff Houtman, and then I did a lesson with Shun Chimizu Sensei over Zoom. He's from Japan. He's one of the best senseis, head students. And then I ran a jujitsu class.
I'm not surprised that a guy like you has done 3 different martial arts today.
They're all good.
What comment or question do you have for the group?
I can't, it'd be nice to come up with a good question, but just one comment that I have, or just one thing to say is that, there's all these, great sayings or pithy aphorisms that, people say. One is like, go with nature, or, everything I know is under my feet. But those really, and the point was already made, but those really are kind of meaningless unless you have the wisdom behind it to back it up. So for instance, if I was working with someone, my age, maybe my skill level, somewhere around that, like a peer, and they just said, oh, you got to go with nature, it'd be like, yeah, okay. But the fact that it is real, it is something that's true, and it can be demonstrated, it can be explained, you can take out pieces of training or pieces of things in real life and say, this is why this is true, this is how this works. And it just goes back to why you really need teachers.
Thank you.
Well, I like that you use the word pithy, because pithy's almost become a word that has a negative connotation, but pithy's like cliche. Like cliches are cliches for a reason. They were so true that they got repeated so many times that we started to not trust them. But they're actually just concise, great ways to say something.
Yeah.
What I was thinking about Dan when we were talking about calmness and how there's certain mindsets that enable you to learn calmness more quickly, right? And one of the things I remember about Dan when he was first coming up in judo was he had absolutely no ego about winning a match in judo. He just was in there doing it. He took tons of falls, right? Happily, with his eyes open. And as a result of that, he was able to perceive the interactions really well. And he learned at quantum speed. He was just calm in the moment, right? Whereas if he had been trying to win everyone, he might have won more judo matches, but he probably wouldn't have learned as quickly.
Well, thank you, Sensei. It's funny you say that, because my plan right now for judo is to kind of go into that mode. Like I want to really get into a place where I'm moving well, moving in good balance, and not fighting so much. And I suspect this means that a lot of the younger guys are going to start putting me on my back a lot more. But I'm not worried about it. I don't mind being on my back. And I think it's going to help improve some things as I go on. So
they should be afraid. They should be very afraid.
Yeah, that's
suck. I'm just working.
Yeah. They should be afraid is what we said. And I think that's because you've already made the decision that you're not afraid to go to those places where most people resist them. Right? It's easy to take a couple of shots when you've got the atomic bomb on your side, right? Like it's easy for a couple of bullets to bounce off of you when you got the atom bomb that you're going to drop soon, right? So I like your mentality, and I think you're going to do good, and I think you'll get off your back whenever you want. That's my decision.
We'll see what happens.
Well, we'll see you tomorrow morning.
That's right.
10:30 or 11, yeah.
And I'll see you at the end of the month where we're going to, I don't know, I think we're going to do some karate. I might find myself across from you there.
Oh, that would be awesome.
And then I know I'm going to try and do some grappling, and I know I'm going to be on my back a lot when I try and grapple with you.
That's okay. That's a fine position.
Yeah, I look forward to that too.
I remember when I was first doing, I think it was the first Crucible, and I don't know what I was doing when I was grappling with him, but I was doing something. He's like, "That's awesome." He kept saying, keep shrimping, like he's coaching me. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, what is a shrimp? I'm just trying to get the hell away from you. He's like, well, you're doing it very naturally, the way you're supposed to. Yeah,
I might regret saying this, but it was in a way nice for us at the Crucible, because at the end of the day, we're in our element. We're tired, but we're in our element. It might be different if we're tired and not in our element. So just throwing it out there, as in, like, standing up and exchanging fists and feet.
I think he just called down the thunder since we know.
Listen, I'm in charge of the Crucible. I tell you when we do which activity.
Young upstarts.
Right? Yeah, but Dan and I try to train together on Fridays, just him and I, usually just before lunch, 45 minutes or an hour. And sometimes it's Iaido, sometimes it's karate, sometimes it's grappling. So it'll be interesting after this conversation to think about what we want to learn and what we can do.
Yes.
Well, I have a question then for Dano.
Yeah.
And I'll just open the question up to everybody, because Dan does karate, he does Iaido, he does judo, like he's well faceted, and all of us do lots of different disciplines. I've started to think a lot about martial arts, military arts, and the fantasy that people live in, right? If you could have, it's just a question, life and death situation, Dan, which martial art, if you can have it at your disposal, which one of the ones that are you gonna pull out of your backpack or out of your pocket?
Or out of your scabbard.
Certainly, if I had a sword, that would be nice. Man, yeah. One thing that I do, and I don't know if I try to do it or if it's just what I kind of tend toward, is I want, like, the grand unifying theory of everything, right? I want to know how judo is karate, and I want to know how, Iaido is jujitsu. So it seems like there are, differences among these things, but there really are commonalities. So I don't know if I would pull out a martial art. I think ideally I would just pull out my martial art, which is this, conglomeration of all this stuff that I'm trying to, put together into one cohesive thing.
Love that answer.
Yeah.
That's a great answer.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I know if I had to fight Conor McGregor, I'd want a sword. And I equally know that if I did, he would lose.
I like that, right? When people ask you think you could beat Conor McGregor? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would have to have a sword.
Uh,
But he would lose bad.
I like him.
He'd make it for $1 million, though.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Good at that.
Well, Dan, it's good seeing you, buddy.
Great seeing you. I can't wait to see you for the Crucible. This is going to be awesome.
It's going to be awesome. We're going to have to let you go because we're running short on time, and I think we have one other person who's asking questions.
Okay. Well,
yeah,
thank
nice
you
to
so
see you,
much.
Sensei.
I hope to see you soon.
Yes,
Bye.
Sensei. Thank you.
Okay,
Love
great.
that.
Yeah. I by the way, I don't talk about this as much, but I wouldn't mind that 15-round mag in the Glock that I used to have. I would take that very happily right now in most situations. That Andrew Percival, can we see your shining face? I like this question.
Where is he? Come on, Andrew. Get on here.
Hey, Andrew.
How are you, Hachi?
Fine. Good.
Nice sweatshirt.
Hi, Sensei Benson. Thank
Hey,
you.
nice to see you.
My question for you, everyone, any way you guys want to answer is, what has been the hardest lesson you've had to learn or trying to still learn? And what is it that made it finally sink in? And
Personally, with me, it was that I'm not the best, and it's a good thing that martial arts isn't completely on a physical level, because you wane you sort of lose that. So you rely more on your mind and your calmness and your other things. And that I'm not the champion of the world. those are things that when you're really concerned about those things, you find yourself to be quite human, just like everyone else.
Sensu?
Let me defer for a minute. I'm still kind of turning this over.
Do you want me to go, Benz, or do you want to go?
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
The two lessons, Andrew, were the two lessons that Sensu Legacy taught me. To some extent, one I can hide now. I think it's much lesser, and the other I still suffer from a lot. The number one is that Sensu used to just say to me all the time, "You're not ready. You think you're ready. You're not ready." And I wasn't ready. And oftentimes in a tournament or in a fight, I had to be hit so many times where I should have been ready at home. Like I should have been ready all the time. I should have been ready when I opened my eyes. And, how did I overcome that? A lot of failure, right? It's the same, failed at it a lot of times and how did you succeed? Failing, then you succeed. Good teacher keeps reminding you over and over again. I watched your fight. You weren't ready at the beginning. You got caught flat-footed there. You weren't ready for him to turn or do this. So that would be one. The second one for me is the one that I still struggle with a lot. And often, not a lot, probably often is a better word, is Sensu Legacy used to say to me all the time, "Randy, one of your problems is you think everybody's like you. You think they train like you. They think like you. You think they want the same things as you." And that's one of those lessons that I'm getting better at it, that when somebody comes in here, they don't necessarily want what I want. They want what they want. Right. And yeah, so those would be two for me that I've struggled with.
Never expect things to turn out a certain way.
Never expect things to turn out a certain way.
Never. You get mostly disappointed.
Yeah, Andrew, I got two as well. I got one that I'm working on and have been since I was 18, and I'm getting better, but it's the toughest lesson, and it's losing to win. I'm still working on it. It goes back to like literally my amazing dad teaching me you can only put your best foot forward. You can't show weakness. I don't think that's an amazing lesson. So great guy, not a lesson that was necessarily helpful for me to learn, because to learn, I got to be in process with something that I don't know how to do. So I'm always trying to present a certain level of excellence, but I haven't gone through the process to become excellent. And so on a real practical level, it would be like using a fairly athletic hand-eye coordination to keep people away with a jab while sparring. And that works pretty well with anybody who's not amazing, but I never get inside, never deliver real power, and never get over the fear of someone else inside me. I am getting over that, but that's one I'm still working on. And that literally has childhood roots combined with physical roots. So losing to win is something I'm still practicing. And then the one I do have, and this one, I got it just through life and injuries, which is that time is real. Like when I was young, I had a sense of infinitude. It's just, I got all the time in the world. And when I had that first injury at like age 36 and I couldn't train for 6 months, then another one at 41, like not crazy, but holy crap, time's passing and I'm not getting better at this thing I love. And I squandered a lot of time in my 20s. Shit, time is real. And so in many ways, I sometimes overtrain to try and catch up, and I almost have to go, just keep doing this so that you don't injure yourself. But anyways, that's a lesson I do understand now. And I got it through time passing. Like life just being life taught me that time is real. And if I go back to my 24, 21-year-old self, I'd be like, do all the shit you're doing, but start with karate for 2 hours a day.
That's a super honest answer, Benson. I like your answer a lot. We're all anticipating your answer.
This is a really hard question. I've got so many things so many places that I've learned hard lessons, and I think I'm a really stubborn person. It takes a lot for me to learn something. It doesn't mean I don't know that it's right, So there have been a lot of things I've known for a long time. You know, when I first opened my dojo after returning to Japan, um, you know, I was a bit full of myself, right? I'd done very well over there. I trained in Japan. I'm in Michigan. You know, people ought to respect me more. You know how people say people don't they don't care what you know until they know how much you care. And I think I have often been the victim of ego myself, and too often assumed that people should respect me because of my accomplishments instead of how much I care. And I've learned that lesson first intellectually, and in the last 10 years I've learned it emotionally, that I really do care now more about the success of my students than I care about my own skill in the martial arts. But that's a hard battle for me. It always has been. So yeah, that's just one of many.
That's a big step. Very big.
I really appreciate all those answers. There's so many lessons in each of one of those for me that I'm going to try and take forward.
Right, Andrew. Good talking to you.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming on.
congratulations on your grading too. Andrew's a Yonkyu and Iaido now.
All right. Good. Yeah, I was there.
Yeah,
Good job.
allegedly.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, some of us were
As far as
there.
you know.
Great
Thanks,
seeing
Andrew.
everyone.
Nice to see you.
See you. So man, we're down into like the last 6 minutes of this thing.
Yeah.
Setsuna, did you want to talk? You said you might have wanted to talk about the Crucible a little bit. Like, did you want to talk about that a little bit? Frame it up.
Yeah, I don't need to dominate the next 6 minutes, but some of you have been to the Crucible, and I think everybody kind of should know it exists. Everybody that's in our broader circle should know the Crucible exists. A number of years ago, I created this event. It's a 12-hour immersive event. Folks that participate have to agree to show up and stay for the whole thing, no matter how tired they are, assuming they're not dragged away in an ambulance. It's hard. You get chafed, you get exhausted, you get hungry, you're going to get challenged, but you're in a room with a bunch of other martial artists that are willing to make the same sacrifice. And we train. We are in the room for 12 hours. There's a lot of training. We typically do evolution from striking to closing to standing, grappling, and takedowns to groundwork. And along with some mindset stuff and psychology things that I do, we'll do some fitness, we do some stretching, we do some meditation. But it's terrifying for a lot of people to make that commitment. And yet nobody's ever emerged from the Crucible unchanged. Everybody has had transformative experiences, either learning techniques or something about themselves or bonding with other people. And you know, it's just luck for me to have created something like this. And then now that we've done it half a dozen times, we've gotten better at it. Yeah, so if you're in our circle, you should know that it exists. And if you have a shot at coming to Ann Arbor, Michigan on the 31st of July, I encourage you to get over here and do that event with us. You'll love it. It's not about fighting for 12 hours, but it's definitely about fighting your inner demons for 12 hours. And we'd love to have you if you want to join us.
You know, Sensu, the one thing I want to share is I think when people are nervous, they're nervous. Can I do the 12-hour of physical things? And also, who's going to be in that room with me? And one thing that, you know, you always frame up really well at the beginning is like, look, if you're a knucklehead here, like, you're not going to last. Like, you're going to find some people to take that person into the corner and make them in a misery. Everybody's very supportive and very helpful. If you don't know how to grapple, a grappler is going to help you with grappling. If you don't know how to strike, a striker is going to help you with how to do the striking. If you don't know how to throw, I got to be honest with you, at the Crucible, one of the things I really took away was just how, when you give yourself over to a judo player who really knows how to place you and throw you, how safe an exercise it actually is. Like going head ass over tea kettle through the air, and you land and you're like, okay, let's do that again, right? Like, let's go again. I lived through it. Let's do that again. Yeah.
It's utterly transformative. Utterly. Like, I love what you just said. No one leaves unchanged. No one leaves unchanged. It fundamentally changed my life. Y'all know it.
I lost 8 pounds at the last one.
That's amazing. Now you don't have 8 pounds to lose this time.
I don't think I had 8 pounds to lose that time either, but I still did. So what are we going to do? Final thoughts? Next episodes? What do we want to do here?
Who's our next person?
We're up in the air on the next person.
Mystery guest.
Well, there's the potential that it'll be Sean's BJJ coach, who.
Yep. We're real excited to get him on. He's fought in the MMA, beat Rafael dos Anjos. You know, he's got a real palmarès, a real resume. He's just up in the air with his life and his family. So if he's not on next week, we'll get him one day. But he may be able to step in. We'll find out tonight or early in the morning.
Yeah, and I just want to say on that we were going to have Sensu Lindsay on, but technology is an issue where he is in Texas. Doesn't currently have a computer, doesn't have internet. So most of the correspondences we did were by phone, and we can't do it that way. So sadly, we're going to try and figure out a different route forward. We definitely want to talk to him and hear what he has to say, but we just got to figure out a different path forward to be able to chat with him. I am super excited, though, to say that after we get past these next 3, and we do have Mike and Laura Civic coming on in 2 weeks. Really good martial artists, karate people, kabuto people, excellent teachers. And one of the things I really like about them is their dynamics and the way they teach together. They really support each other well on the floor and create a really good learning environment. And they've been around forever. Like, they've been around in martial arts for a long time. So both high ranking. They might be one of the highest ranking husband and wife couples around right now. Like, very high ranking, both of them.
My grandson takes kabuto from them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then after we get past those 3, we're going to have, I think, Sensei Bill Adams is going to come on, right? Sensei Legacy.
Yep.
And I'm going to just mention the name. We have Sensei Fumio de Mora confirmed for August that we're going to have Sensei de Mora on. He's very excited to come on. And again, I've said this before. If you don't know who Fumio de Mora is, like, you should go throw yourself off a bridge or something if you're in martial arts. But just a little anecdote. If you don't know who Sensei de Mora is, he's the person that they based the Mr. Miyagi character in the Karate Kid on. And he was Pat Morita's stunt double on those Karate Kid shows. He has so many books and DVDs and just such a well-known and well-respected sensei and martial artist. So super excited to be chatting.
So excited for that chat.
Yeah. How about final thoughts? So that's what I think is what's coming up. Oh, one other thing we should say that's coming up is next Wednesday. You won't be able to see it live, but it'll show up on YouTube. Next Wednesday, Sensei Legacy and I are going to be on the Karate Canucks podcast.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, super good guy. Doing people who are on this right now on this show, like Sensei Maletsky has been on there. Yeah, really looking forward to chatting with him. It's gonna be fun. I know it.
That's awesome. Final thoughts, Hanshi. You want to kick us off?
Oh, I have no more thoughts. We talked so much. I'm spent.
Right.
So, not really. I'm really enjoying this. These seem to be pretty good. I don't normally talk quite as much as when we're just talking like we're all sitting around the living room. So I really enjoyed these. That's it.
Right. I'm Sensei Suino.
The day you step into a dojo is the day you become a student. That's what I'm taking away from today.
Yeah.
Sensei Dauphin.
On that, I remember, I think it was on the first day of karate, Sensei Legacy said, the day you take your naked foot and put it in my dojo, you'll never be the same in your whole life after that. And that's definitely a true statement. He didn't say that tonight, but I just wanted to share that. But what Sensei Legacy did say tonight that it's kept rattling around in my head, which is on the inside, we're all equal. On the inside, we're all equal. I like that. I'm going to be rattling that around in my brain for a while.
Thanks, Sensei. Yeah, the one for me that you said, Hanshi, is just there's always more. You know, like when you said that, I feel that and I hear that and I'm excited for that. There's always more. And I love that and I believe it. The other thing that's on a more practical note that I just want to share is like, you know, based on the Ontario restrictions, like we probably are going to be able to come see you in July. Like that is fucking incredible. We've been talking about this for over a year and a bit now, how we can't wait to do this in person. And again, barring some crazy mutant strain or whatever, that's actually going to happen. And that feels really great to me. Like I'm a little trepidatious, but I'm a lot more like we're doing it and I'm excited. And, you know, even just flying to Vancouver, I'll see some martial artists out there and it's just, oh, is this tasting just a little like normal? And as of tonight, the answer is yes. And so that's my final thought, is that I'm so excited that we can actually do the thing we keep saying, which is start to look for each other in person, see each other.
I personally would like to see everyone come to Canada a little bit. As you know, my situation.
Let's make it happen. Let's make an event if we need to, and start working on that date.
Those
Make it happen.
events are coming for sure.
Yeah.
Those events are coming. Yeah, so I want to just send, like, I'm looking at the guests who are on here all the time, and I just want to send out a big thanks to everybody and the technical people helping us. Andre's running things tonight, but you know, I see Sensei Copeland. He comes every time. Dan is here again. Doug Nispel, always, I don't think he's ever missed. Christine Hussey never misses. Same thing with Pam Swino. When we get across the border, that girl's going to get squeezed like she's never gotten before. Can't wait to see her. We got Sensei Maletsky's on and a whole slew of the students from Legacy Shredder. One in particular, I just want to send a shout out to, which is Kendall Hutchinson. I know we haven't been able to see each other as much, but he still keeps supporting these events. And I really miss that guy and I can't wait to see him back in the dojo. He's another one. I'm going to give that guy such a big hug. It has to be a big hug because he's a huge guy. He's like 6'5", but I can't wait to give that guy a big hug.
Me too. I'll bring a stool.
yeah. One of us can get on the other's shoulders, Sensei. We can
That's awesome. Well, thanks everybody. And I want to echo that, like you tune in each week and it's such a beautiful thing. So we look forward to letting you know ASAP who our guest is for next week, unfolding our next 2 weeks, taking our break, having Sensei Mora on, and for you taking this ride with us all the way into August and the fall.
And we are going to get Sensei Panecchia on as soon as he's available. He'll be in.
Thanks everybody. Stay safe and we'll see you soon.
Great seeing everybody.
Night.
Cheers.